everyone, it's Jeannie here. Today, I am honored to be joined by country superstar Granger Smith. He recently made a huge announcement, and we'll get into that. But he also has a memoir on the horizon, like a river. Granger, this is not my first time talking to you, and I remember just being so touched by our conversations in the past. So I'm excited about this. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so you made an announcement and it's all over social media, but for our listeners and viewers and readers who do not know, can you kind of give us a little brief synopsis of what that big announcement was?
Yeah, it's something I've known for myself for a little bit, at least my family and my team. But recently announced to the world that I would be stepping down from music touring and essentially replacing that time with ministry in a very loose sense of the term, meaning it's not clearly defined what my ministry will be, besides the fact that I'll be attending seminary, continuing that, uh, pouring into my own local church and letting them teach and disciple me. And then this book that you mentioned, like a river, that I'll be promoting.
Yeah, that's awesome. Very brave, and I know it's not easy to make such a transition. I know you've been touring for 24 years, so that's major. Talk about that moment. When was the moment that you were like, you know what? I think either God is asking me or I think I need to do this. What was that moment?
It was very gradual, very, very gradual. And I keep a digital journal. And so I go back on that journal and I could see as the wheels are turning. And the first thing, it wasn't all just, hey, this is all, going to give up at once. It started with giving up my record label, which I did in October of 2021. So that was the first big step, was giving up really chasing country radio, because that was taking up the biggest amount of time in my touring,
Mm,
was promoting singles. And so I realized that's I can't do all of this. I can't do all of this at the same time. So I left the record label. And then it was a year later when I started realizing that that wasn't enough. It was touring was also something I needed to surrender. Um,
wow.
which just goes to show you, for me, that hey, maybe there's more stuff. But but it's just one step at a time. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's how what following God is like, it's layer by layer, and sometimes it's surrendering, and sometimes it's processing, things that we've been
Yep.
through that we haven't surrendered, like in an emotional way. Um, Amazing. I gotta say, I kind of understand, not to the same degree as you. I used to be a pop star, when Jesus kind of got a hold of my heart, and I was
Mm.
successful, had a top, Billboard hit and gold record and all that, and
I did not know
I
that.
yeah. And Jesus got a hold of me and I started to feel that same thing. Like that, I had spent all my life building my own empire. And I was a teenager or late in my late teens, early young adult, and I made it. But then when Jesus got a hold of me, I just felt like it was competing affections and I needed to lay it down. And I heard you say something in your announcement that kind of made me, it just reminded me, like you brought me back to that moment in time where I had to make a decision. Am I going to continue to do what I'm doing, or am I just going to pursue God and see what he has? Talk about that. Um it's not that our gifts are wrong. It's not that our talents are wrong, but sometimes there's an idolatry thing that happens, especially in us artists.
Yeah.
Talk about that, because I understand you, but I don't know if everyone would actually understand that. And other people have other things that become those idols, that self gratification. Talk a little bit about that. You mentioned that.
Yeah, absolutely. So the thing that was making the final decision for me, I think that what made it easier for me, I guess, is because there's this argument that people could give me, and it's a good argument, that you could say, well, you have a great platform, You have a lot of people that are watching you and following you. You're going to all these concerts, these people come. God's using that. God will redeem that. God will use that for his glory. So just go with it. Be the country singer that preaches the gospel from the stage, and you be a light in a dark place. And it's a pretty good argument. And so I wrestled with that for a long time. But then, to your point, though, that was never God. God could say, we see revealed in the scripture, in some sense, God saying, "Don't tell me how to get my glory. Don't tell me how you are going to give me glory. I tell you that. I decide
Mhm.
that, and I decide that on whatever level it's going to be. I decide if it's the old widow that gives everything she has with just a couple pennies. If that brings me glory, that brings me glory. Not build yourself up and make you as big as you can, so then you could preach to a wider audience and give a lot of money. He says, I don't need your money. I don't need your audience. I don't need your platform. I don't need your stage. It's us as humans. We're the ones that decide, hey, the bigger the platform, the more glory. God says, I never said that. So this is something, that I had to kind of unpack over a long period of time, that it's the self-idolatry that was always the problem with me. It was getting on the stage and needing praise and craving it, and almost to some extent demanding it. It's like right
Mm.
before we walk on stage, how's it look out there? I tell them, ask my guys, how's it look? Are they excited?
Yeah.
What I'm actually saying is, if they're not excited, this is not going to be a fun show. If they're not worshiping us, then it's not going to be a fun night. That's really what I'm saying in a reverse way. And so that's a big problem. That's a big problem. Not going up with humility, saying it doesn't matter if there's just one person out there. That's all that matters. It's not about us. It's about the one person. I wish I could really mean that, but I can't. It's because I can't. I have to strip it away. It's idolatry.
Wow. Thank you for being so honest because it's real. That's real. And I remember exactly what you're saying. I do think that it might not always be that way, in our journeys. We get stripped away and then sometimes rebuilt, and maybe God will do something like that in you. I remember when I started to sing worship music for the first time years after stepping away from being a pop star, and I literally laid it down. I was like, God, take away my voice, please. This is an idol, like in my ignorance.
Yeah.
It was really me. It was my own, self wanting that praise. But then years later, I started, to actually do some worship stuff, and then I would go on the stage, and people were not cheering. They were just
Mm.
like, and I didn't know if they were taking it in like that. The thing had to completely die, and I would never know until I got off the stage, and people were like, "The Lord was touching me," and I was like, "Oh, good," because I couldn't tell. But
Yeah. Yeah.
it was me wanting that pray, to know, are they
Right.
getting it? Do they feel what I'm singing? So that's amazing, and I commend you for that. I know it's not easy, but I know it will be worth it. This journey that you're on. Talk about seminary. You're in seminary.
Mm.
That's amazing. How's that experience been for you? I know it's a Baptist seminary. I don't know.
Hmm.
Right.
Yeah,
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 no.
Southern. It's been pretty overwhelming. I mean, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of reading. So I'm putting in probably 25 hours or so a week on that, because I'm a little bit slower reader and a slower processor. I'm sure that some people just kind of could fly by and do great at that, but it's been encouraging because most people in my classes are pastors at a church, either associate pastors. There are some lead pastors, worship pastors, but most of them work in a church, and they're
Mm.
they're grabbing a seminary degree. There are a few that are younger, like straight out of college, and they're getting it, but that helps me because pastors are really busy. So I can't complain that I'm busy, because
Mhm.
pastors are they're in demand, and so they're going through the same things that I am, and they're smarter than me. They are better spoken than I am, and so it's nice. It's encouraging to be around people that are lifting me up, and some of the stuff is pretty boring, and then some of the stuff is just fantastically interesting. So I take all of it. I take all of it. And I guess to that point, what's important about seminary for me is that if I'm learning on my own, I'm going to seek out the books that I want to read. I want to watch
Mm,
the YouTube videos that I want to see. Seminary is making me spread out and see and read all kinds of things that I
yeah.
might not be interested in, but I need to learn anyway.
Yeah, it's a holistic view, and you know, you don't really know where God is leading in the sense of ministry, so it's good to know it all. I'm a
Yeah.
pastor's wife, and my husband has done way too much seminary, and I'm like, I do not envy you at all.
Yeah, yeah, for
But I
sure.
do see how well versed he is in things that I think are completely boring or whatever. But then he'll come in contact with someone who is on that wavelength, and he knows how to communicate with them. So it's funny because you keep saying we're not launching a revival, we're not,
Yeah. Yeah, yeah,
starting our own church and all that. But you don't know what God is gonna do anyway.
yeah.
That's what I keep thinking. Because I mean, obviously, ministry is in you. When I sat down with you for Moonrise, when we talked about the film, I can hear God speaking through you. I can hear ministry in you. Obviously, it's in you. Um, but talk about just what that looks like. I know you said, you're sitting under your pastors
Mm.
to be discipled, which is major in any Christian's growth. But do you at all ever see yourself kind of stepping out in a role? Like if they would ask you like, hey, would you, speak, or would you teach, or
Yeah,
where
for
do you see
sure.
yourself?
So what I mean by I'm not starting a revival, what I mean is on August the 27th, the day after the last day of the tour, we're not pouring concrete, breaking ground on a mega church in
Yeah,
Texas.
yeah.
That's
Got
what I
it. Yeah.
mean.
Hmm.
I'm not pitching a tent at the Yee farm and inviting people to come join in on the Lord's Supper on the August 28th. That's not the plan. That's what I mean. But uh, as I learn, I am going out and preaching. I'll be preaching coming this Sunday actually, and then the 2 Sundays after that. So I do get out and occasionally get to go to a church and teach a little bit, which by the way I love, which kind of a little bit gives me a little bit of an alarm because I do love it, and I think, oh, I have to be careful with that. If I start loving this,
Mm.
what am I loving about it? So I just need to be careful with that. So I think pouring into my local church with guys that have done it for a long time, they could teach me, could then help affirm like, hey, Granger, you're seeking the wrong things here, or you're keep following this, you're doing great. And then one day, maybe it's a church, maybe I'm just a traveling guy, maybe I'm just an elder in my local church and I teach there. But the great thing about it is I don't have to decide that today.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And that's what being led by, the Spirit of God is. And I love that. What a beautiful journey you're on. I know you have your book, and I want to spend the last couple minutes just talking about that because you said the book is more important than touring to you. Like you'd rather
Yeah,
go out there and promote the book. And we were able
yeah.
to talk about um your past in our last interview, but talk to us about what people can really expect from the book and why such a statement like that can be made for those that don't know.
Well, if when people ask me questions about grief or losing my son, or they talk to me about um, how my family, how we operate as a family under God, how I was reborn, how I the progression I made, the work that God did in me, all those questions, everything is all in the book. So one day on after August 1st, I'll be able to say, here, read this book, and it'll have everything, or listen to the audiobook, whatever. So it's a great conversation starter. It's a great beginning of what I want to be able to teach and show. And a book is so intimate. I mean, the people will be reading this book or listening to the audiobook, and it'll feel like I'm having a conversation with them, because that's how I feel when I read a book. They'll be in their living room having an intimate story time with me on something that's very personal to me in many ways in my life. So that's going to be more important than touring, because to start the conversation with that book, will then kickstart many other deeper conversations.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of ministry. Being a pop star and a country star, you have a couple minutes to make someone feel something, right, with a song. But when it's soul work and we're digging as artists or humans or Christians, followers of Jesus, we're digging into that place of vulnerability. The ministry that carries on can be forever. It can be one
Mm,
word, that'll reach the depths of somebody's soul that will literally be the seed that transforms their life later on and they become whoever God has called them to
that's
be.
right.
So thank you for this huge seed of work that you're gonna share with the world. Just talking to you is amazing and hearing your testimony is amazing. I can't wait to hear it all, read it all. And I just thank you for your surrender, your yes. Oh my God. If more people were like that, then we
Mm.
would really be out here doing what God wanted us. And I thank you so much, Granger, really. And
Well,
thank
well,
your
praise
wife.
God, and thank you for the encouragement. Yeah, I'll tell her that too.